Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar on the art of making productions look larger, presented by Robert Grobler. My name is Laura Lawrence and I'm the Global Marketing Director at Harman. So just a few things before we get started. Everyone on the call is muted to keep down noise levels during the webinar. However, there is a chat function where you can submit questions to the presenter and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible at the end. This webinar is being recorded and the link will be made available a few days after this presentation. We do have a number of other webinars taking place over the next few months for audio, lighting, video, and control, and we'd like to encourage you to take a look at the different webinars in our learning sessions at Harman.com, as well as visiting Harman Professional University to see our many on-demand and certification courses that are available to you for free. And now I'd like to introduce you to Robert Grobler, the presenter for today's webinar. After starting his lighting career in 2000, Robert became a senior lighting engineer at Earhouse, South Africa, one of South Africa's leading AV in 2013. With a broad range of skills and an eye for detail, Robert believes in sticking to simple standards and principles. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Robert.
Thanks, Laura, and welcome, everybody. Yes, this is going to be very interesting. Hopefully, something everybody can learn something of and take home, even if it's just one thing, and the mission's achieved. Please feel free to throw in those questions, lots of them. I prefer lots of questions. It just makes it more exciting, and that cross into action, a lot more people can learn stuff from it. So right, here we go. Sorry, give me a second here. Sorry guys, I'm just having a little glitch here. Anyway, we'll just wing it. So why the pressure and expectations for it to look larger? Because everybody always wants that $1 million shot, wants it to look the best. They want to give it their best, and obviously sometimes budget is a bit of a problem. So obviously one of the first things we look at is the client's expectations versus the client's budget. I'm sure you all have those clients that think they can dream up another world regardless of their budget, probably because they have no clue what it takes to deliver that dream that they have. One of the most common things you hear when you try and educate a client is like, but I've done it before. Might be possible that they've done it before, but the scale of it might be slightly different. This is a common challenge we face almost daily. If you can't relate to this, I'm very lucky and very jealous of you. However, I'm sure we all have at least one of them. One of the other reasons we want to make it look bigger than what we got is to keeping our cost of sales low. With a continuous pressure from vendors to keep those costs low due to them trying to secure work for us, trying to make deals, keep the income playing and stuff like that, it becomes essential to try and keep those costs low. So we have to adapt our style of what we do. We continue to push different boundaries and do the best we can to find a balance and to get the best of both worlds. Sometimes we nail it, and sometimes, well, let's just say the client or the punters don't pick it up, it was a good day. Just as long as we keep on trying. Slightly off the topic there on that, very important note. Probably one of the first tips I want to give you is whenever a client or promoter comes to you with an idea, doesn't matter how stupid it might be or how well you know it won't work, never say no. Always just put up that plastic smile and go, sure, let's try it. Get the client to sit next to you, do exactly what they want to do. You never know, sometimes you might just be surprised. One of the other things is it helps you to evolve your skills as a designer. you master the skill of being resourceful with the equipment you have available, it will be a huge benefit in the long run. Clients will even go as far as to share with other clients how much they really need you on their project, regardless of who's working on it. This is a great platform for you to do some cross-pollination with other designers, share some ideas, push each other's boundaries, and mold each other. Right, so let's look at a few roles of a designer. Obviously, we've got expectations versus reality. Expectations is to supply a solution for the people to see the performer they enjoy watching. Very important. Rule number one, and this is always rule number one. Let there be lights on the people so they can see the star on stage. This will always be the first objective. And yes, it's true, people don't hum to the lights when they go home, so make sure they can see that rock star. Creative concepts using the art of light is to aid in telling a story. It's your job to create an interpretation of what you hear, what you feel in the music, and to frame a story. Make every look unique. Just tracking back a bit, speaking about humming to the lights. Sorry, noise boys, but have you ever noticed sometimes when people show off videos of concerts they went to, how amazing it looked, and they drop the next comment going, not sure why the sound is so bad on my recording. Just putting it out there, no hard feelings to all the sound guys. Right, in reality, we pretty much do what is expected from us, and a lot more. Don't you just love it when you arrive on site and you find out for some reason they've left out a piece of scenery, or even worse, dropped out a piece of video screen that was helping you create a nice frame of content, and then you hear that horrible line going, what can we do with the lights to fill that space and make it look interesting? At that point where you hit the phrase, go, go, gobo wheel. Nothing like a cheesy gobo to fill that hole. Fact is, it's going to happen. Deal with it. And the next tip I would give you is work on a bag of tricks. I like having a bag of tricks most of the time when I need it or when I'm not sure or in doubt. When I work on TV productions, I like always keeping a box of Mac 101s or Rush Pars, anything else that's small and punchy in my back pocket, because you never know when you might need them. This is probably a good place to mention another off-the-topic point, but everything we do these days in a certain way is broadcasted or streamed. You think of it, the punter takes a video, he shares it with his friends. They go live on Facebook. It might be a rock concert or with IMAX screens or product launch. Somewhere there's always a camera. Biggest tip I can give you is work on your dark art. Yes, use the force of creating that look you want to, that can translate the same way in a photo or video. Remember, people's Instagram accounts end up being pretty much the majority of your portfolio. While you are busy with the lighting design, just design the set as well while you're at it. Not sure if this is applicable to all. I can tell you now, everybody in South Africa now is nodding their heads and probably giving me a loud amen. So yes, we design almost anything and everything. Okay, know your resources. Know what to use where possible. Putting this presentation together, I came up with this phrase, and I'm pretty much breaking it up in a few interesting facts stuff, and I'm sure you guys can extend or add more to it, but I tried to keep it to the basics. So, knowing what you have available is always a great start. Don't just assume you can always have what you want. There's always T's and C's that apply. Might not be budget, the vendor says stick to what I've got in the shop, or sometimes you can be lucky and they say you can take whatever you need to, but you might end up reducing it. But seriously, this is always the best starting point. I've done a fair amount of jobs with a designer a few people might know called Tim Dunn from Special Project Resources in the UK. When he was still living in SA, I would often put a package list together for him. And he had a crazy skill taking that list, putting together amazing looking designs without sneaking in the oddball fixture. But also, he would never leave a spare unit, but he was extremely skilled, or is extremely skilled at doing that. Okay, what is the product potential and application you use it for? Knowing what you have, you can start drawing straight away, keeping in mind the product's potentials and the different application you could possibly use it for. Everything can work for more than one purpose. We'll get in touch base with that a bit later. Using it. How can I use that product? Having carefully considered the potential of the equipment and the various options, you need to consider how to use this and create multiple unique looks. Okay. Do I just do a traditional front truss with blinders? Or do I mix it up, strip those 8 light molds down to a bunch of 2 cells and scatter them all over the place? By the way, Brad, I can't wait to do something with those new atomic dots. Just saying, pal. This brings me to my next point, the where. Where will it work the best? I'm sure you've had a brief, even a meeting over a video conference with an artist, giving you directions, giving you his thoughts, his dreams, his looks, his feels. It's up to you to create their vision and know what they have in their head. I know sometimes we wonder on how on earth is it even possible? Some of the things they want are crazy. You need to see what is possible with what you have. If not, look at it again, and I'm sure you'll find a way. Sometimes you will hit a brick wall, and then you don't have an option, but at least you keep on trying. Tips and tricks. Yes, as cheesy as it sounds, I could not think of anything else to call this slide. So have a good laugh. Considering everything I've mentioned, I want to share some of the tips and tricks I've learned over the years, some small things, and show you some examples of, and go off the topic slightly to share some great memories. Use those small fixtures. Don't be scared to use those little lights. My early days, I used to work for a well-respected lighting designer called J.R. Riley, who resides in New Zealand right now. On our way to a festival one day he said, if you ever have a crazy mix of lamps, start dim upstage and work your way downstage. Let's think about it. If you start with the smaller units upstage, you mix up the trims, the beam angles, you can cheat it. Anything can look more or less the same depending on the way you cheat it and you manipulate it. As I've mentioned, small, punchy lights are great for plugging holes. If you look at the picture on the slide, we have created a wall of lights behind the musicians that were fairly far downstage. I mixed it up with a combination of Mac 101s and Rush pots. The only reason for the mix was I only had 48 Mac 101s available at the time. To try and work a design with 5 layers of truss required with 24 fixtures per truss, I had to find a way to create those big thumping moments. So we ended up doing a truss of 101s Rush, alternating all around. All the Rush parts, due to time and tight loadings, we focused literally straight downstage at a 45-degree angle downwards. The 101s allowed me to mix it up a bit, and it helped to avoid a one-look wonder. Oh, before I forget to mention, This was far upstage on a 25-meter four-polar stagecoach, for those who are familiar with the stagecoach system. Same artist, same roof 12 months earlier. We had a lot of moving elements. I think it was only the side upstage and crowd blind trusses that did not actually move. It was crazy, it was big, we had very little time. We ended up adding 3 more portals to the roof to aid with the dynamic load. Anyway, getting back on track. The scene in the picture was a moment where we toned it down. I needed something low above the upstage video wall, and originally I wanted to use some big lens beamish units, which we didn't own anyway, apart from our oversized big chunky 5K searchlights. Thanks to the height being fairly low in the beam angle and the musicians being so far downstage, I managed to get away with a 700-watt wash light unit. This might not have worked as expected, but sometimes you have to take a risk. Luckily, this risk paid off. Same show, different moment. As I mentioned, we had a lot of moving elements. Now is a good time to tell you that the original design had about 3 times the amount of fixtures. Sometimes it's good to thin out a truss. If you look at the angled diamond-shaped trusses in the pic, you will actually see it's 4 independent trusses. I'm sure you can see my mouse pointers, so if you're struggling to see it, just kind of floating around. All that. I really, really love this picture. To be honest, if I had the original count of fixtures on it, it would not have looked the same, which was great. Yes, I could have probably just killed the dimmers, closed the shutters, left the look as is. But with the amount of time we put this in, I wouldn't have probably thought that far. I've got a friend, Thomas, that's most likely watching this, and he once said, "We like black. Black truss, black everything. Remember, black is also a color. Embrace the black." So where do I start? Design your own show and go over the top. Go big and then walk away. After that cup of coffee or that cigarette outside, come back and start using the delete button. Without any emotions, and be objective. It's very important for you to ask yourself, do I really need this huge cluster of lights? How much can I do with it? And will it only be a one-trick pony? I once had a very interesting conversation with Steve Lieberman. He made a statement I will never forget. I'm sure you won't mind me sharing it. He said, "You know you really have a great design and it works when at any given stage you can stop and take a picture." 5 minutes later, the sun was busy setting. He worked out this amazing big red look, turned around, leaned against the console, struck a pose and said, "Go on, take a picture." And here is my picture. One mad, intense, no idea what will happen next. Amazing job I've ever worked on. It looked amazing. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the format. If not, here's a short, brief rundown. We had 4 stages, 4 crews battling it out, and the crowd chose one winner. The entire stage was approximately 60 meters wide. Only structured time code cue, my desk, was an opening video introduction of the show, introduction of the MCs, and the countdown timers. The rest we all had to make up as we went along because they were battling it out. So, let's take a bit of a closer look at this. Each of the 4 individual stages consisted of about 12 2-cell blinders, 6 Vipers, 10 Atomics, 40 rush cars, yes, 40. 8 generic LED footlights and some small beam lights. Looking at the gear list, you will notice there's a lot of rush bars, a lot of small fixtures, and it was crazy. My friend Thomas, I'm sure he's watching, one of the best disguise programs I know, can probably tell you a few stories about the things we got up to with those rush bars. In short, the backdrop at the back that the rush bars were lighting, we referred to as lumen foil. We had to make it sound cool because we were looking at some form of a fabric that would carry light nicely, and ended up going with what was actually chicken wire from the local hardware store. Lighting it with the rush bars actually made it look great. I'm sure you're all familiar with a layer bay, and we used each one as a pixel. So it just happens that if you've got a 2x2 bay and you hang a rush bar 2 meters away, at 96% zoom, you can pretty much fill up the entire bay. Now we just slap some pixel mapping on it, follow old school cheesy EQ, tweak the saturation, depending how high the audio level went on the EQ, and we had magic. Cheesy, but magic cheese. The individual stages looked great, basics were covered, and the rush bars did the chunk of the job. Once we combined all of these stages, it looked incredible, mostly due to all the little lights doing their job in a big way. Sometimes less is more. Yes, less is more. In the early days of my career, I hated it. I did not agree with it, and I thought this was only applicable to theatre. Then eventually I realized a few things when compiling this presentation and reflecting back on memories of the past jobs. Sometimes by leaving more empty spaces allows the fixtures to do a lot more. Use those units with a zoom. Mix up the trim heights. Manipulate those beam angles. Hey, if you still have Mac 250 ontours at your shop, go dig out those aperture gobos in the little plastic tub everybody just moved one side when they got those lights. Replace those static gobos you don't like, and it will amaze you the difference you can create with those old units. Doesn't matter. Use your resources. I mentioned earlier when you start to design, go big. Don't hold back. Create something amazing and walk away. Here's a perfect example where I went through the motions. Sorry, this is where I want to go. So this is a perfect example when I went through this motions. The picture, even though it was my third revision, it was the first picture I sent to the client. I remember a week later, I landed in Kigali, Rwanda for a conference, and the feedback came from the client. And I quote, "We love it, it looks great, but we want something unique that matches the budget. When people walk into the arena and they see the stage, they need to know they have the delicious food festival." Needless to say, I was over the budget. I tried to push the boundaries, and in a nutshell, I interpreted it as, no, we don't like it. It was during a dinner set during my conference time in Kigali that I've decided, let me take another swing at it. I did something very, very basic. I Googled the festival logo and started using the delete button, and I was on a mission. And here was the end result. You can see that sometimes adding a bit of cheese works. It is, after all, a food and music festival. Not knowing better, creating that mic and fork prop was the left hook, and boy did it work. I actually got a call 2 days ago from the festival promoters, and they are doing a huge rebranding marketing campaign around the visual look of those two scenic pieces. I managed to keep the big IMAX screens from the original design, using the suggestion that I can make them digital sponsor spaces between the performance acts. They use this instead of large prints they used to lit. So now instead of using a boring print, just the sponsors' names on it, we could actually put video in motion and keep it fresh, keeping the audience entertained with the various ads and the brands that were on it. I cut the entire lighting and video treatment on stage in half, and thanks to that mark and fork, they are keeping the look for at least another 3 years. The beauty of this is now I can start adding elements in I originally took out without having to break my head to redesign something new for this project. Make everything you use multifunctional when possible. This is one of the greatest, most essential cheats I've come to use, especially when it comes to television work. Make those special. If you've got a TV production that's fixture hungry, this will definitely save your butt. Figure out what units you can fulfill more than one role. After all, camera shots are not always on the wide, so you can cheat it well, as long as you rehearse it properly and you understand what the camera flow is going to be. Anything can go if you wanted to. When I was working on Strictly Come Dancing, I used my illumination lights as my texture and my floor saturation colors and big backlight looks when I needed it for the wide shots. Some of my wash units on the floor would become my key lights for my host. Bottom line is, there's always a way to make things work. How many of the people you know, or the vendors or the companies out there, still have ACLs? I know they might look a bit like the dog's breakfast, but use them, given that you can still find bowls for them and you have an actual sufficient power supply for them. In the far distance background, no one will see how dinged up they are. If you don't have ACLs and it's too expensive to go for that beam look, use some rush bars. It is up to you to know how you want to cheat it. In the picture here, I used, I think, 16 bars of ACLs in the far distance for backlights on the audience for a music show. And every time they had to do a reverse shot during a performance, I could ramp them up, giving it a bigger, brighter look to it. So use those audience key lights in a reverse shot, and they will make great candy performances when they shoot the reverse shot into the audience. In essence, I want to leave you with these thoughts. Build your own bag of tricks. Be objective. Remember, black is a color. Use those little fixtures. And sometimes less is a whole lot more. Brad?
Hi, Robert. Great presentation.
Hi. Thanks, man.
All right. Let's see here. We have a few questions that came in. The first question is, what was the smallest size rig you had to make work for a show?
One of the smallest rigs I had to make work for a show. Sure. If I really have to go back in time, I would say I was quite renowned for doing small little tours with local artists with only 4 4 Mac 250s and 2 bars of 6. Gold lamp bars. Pardon?
Okay, the next question is, what is your favorite less is more moment that you created?
Probably, we did a festival last year. It's a festival I've been doing for the last 3 years called Castle Light Unlocks, which is a big R&B hip-hop music festival. I think one of the best moments were where we just killed everything, and we had one follow spot and one backlight on Post Malone. That was one of the most amazing favorite looks I had that I've seen.
Okay, the next question is asking, you mentioned a show where you pixel mapped rushed cars and had it controlled by the audio. How often do you make use of pixel mapping in this manner?
I don't use pixel map a lot because I'm a bit old school when it comes to certain things. If there's a real need for it, or it'll definitely make a different look to it, I would use it. The only times I've actually used pixel map is when I got to work with a gentleman called Thomas Peters. And the pure reason is because I feel that the disguise server actually gets the pixel mapping right. It actually gets those nice rich saturated colors out on it. But just using pixel map because I don't have anything else to do on it, I avoid it. I'm very selective when it comes to pixel mapping.
All right, the next question is asking, what do you typically cut from revision 1 to 2 to 3, or for example?
As I mentioned, I have an idea, I have a drawing in my head, and I just keep on going. So it creates the look that I feel that I have in my head. Often I would switch off certain classes or layers and stuff depending on what your preference is of drawing tool. And when you switch everything on, you realize, hang on a second, I've made the upstage video wall way bigger than what the actual stage roof can handle. Or then you start scaling it down. So I think the first option is revisions, most likely scaling it down to fit within the venue. Obviously, I've learned that revision 0 before I start putting anything in these days is to draw in the sound system. I prefer grabbing the sound vision file from the guys, and I actually take the time to draw in the boxes at the correct angles, because a few degree changes in box angles can make a sound ramp almost a meter longer, depending on how many boxes you hang. And we all know they have the issue if the truss is in the way. So if I've got the audio design in there, the first revision is fairly easy because everything kind of works around that, which I think is kind of an important element, especially now that everybody's going for the hyperreal and submersive sound designs and multiple hangs and stuff like that. Usually by the time I send anything to a client, it is to the point where I think it'll fit into the budget. I always push the boundaries with initial concept drawings, because a picture can sell. Nothing stopping you of going to a client and going, hey man, this is what I drew up. I know you only have, I don't know, let's say $100 for this job. But if you really like this picture, it's going to cost you $120. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you have to try. Always try and oversell with your designs.
Okay, the next question is asking, what's the smallest stage you have done?
The smallest stage I've done was a 6x4 meter.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, I'm not great in converting right now to foot, but it'd probably be, I don't know, Sorry, my head's fried. I can't think of that right now. But it's small. It is really small.
All right, the next question is asking, what is your favorite color to mix to?
I don't have one favorite color. I'm a big fan sometimes of going to those dark ambers mixed with a bit of lavender. Most of the time I try and not exceed 2 colors. Sometimes I push the boundary to 3, just depending on if I feel it needs that extra color to help give more depth of feel to it. But nothing in particular. I'm probably the least greatest fan of green, because not a lot of people look great in green. And of course, being in Africa, there's one rule in Africa: never light a black person in green. It looks terrible. So yeah.
Okay, it looks like that was the last question that came in. If anybody has additional questions.
Laura, this is Brad again. This is Brad. I have one more question I'd like to ask Robert.
Sure.
Robert, when you're doing your shows, are you just designing, or do you work with a programmer and/or a lighting director? And if you do, how do you get them to see your vision and understand working with less and more and translating to those big looks, going from the designer to the programmer operator?
Okay, so on my own shows that I design, I am pretty much the designer and the programmer and the operator. Depending on the size of it, I might get a second programmer and operator in. We've got a learnership at our company, and I've taken 2 young lads in the last 5-6 years, and I've pretty much tried to train them and teach them everything I know. One specifically, our relationship and our work skills are of such a nature, if we are in a multi-user instance on a show busking away, we pretty much just look at each other and we know what needs to happen. But that's getting to work with everybody, spending a lot of time with each other. There is often cases where I work with other designers, and I prefer taking up the supportive role where I will look after them, let them take the lead, make sure it happens, do the grunt work. And it's fairly easy in the context of you just need to, from the word get-go, communicate, go, this is what I'm going to do. Will this help? Are you cool with it? And then just do your best you can. I found in the last 3 years, with the size and the scale of shows growing, that it's important that as a designer from the show, even the operator or programmer, we need to show support to the local lighting tech plugging up the lights as much as he wants to support you and make sure he gets it in on time so you can do whatever you need to do. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much.
It looks like we had another question come in while you guys were talking. So this one says, so given that you've done some really large shows, do you feel that you have some way of adapting the big feel down to smaller shows, be that a small venue or a tougher budget?
Sorry, Laura, you broke up there for a second. Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. It says, so given that you have done some really large shows, do you feel that you have some way of adapting the big feel down to smaller shows, be that a small venue or a tougher budget?
Absolutely. I mean, that's where I've started. When building this presentation, I was actually looking for a whole bunch of archive photos of the early 2000s, which unfortunately I could not find, where in a certain genre of music in South Africa, I was pretty much the king of taking 12 fixtures and 4 lamp bars and making everything look greater and bigger. The current picture on the Q&A slide, that's usually the launch of a new project for that artist. And after that, we go to smaller arenas and stuff, and we literally chop the look and feel up by 75%. So we reduce it to a 25% rig of that. And I think that's an important thing where the role of less is more comes in. I mean, just the fact that you've got 100 lamps hanging in the booth doesn't mean you need to use those 100 lamps all the time, because then you will run into trouble when you have to do a smaller scaled version of it. So yeah, hope that helps, answers the question.
Okay, wonderful. Brad, anything else on your end?
No, just thank you very much, Robert. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Robert, for presenting. We really appreciate it. And for everyone that attended, we appreciate you giving your time to this webinar today. Robert's information is up on the screen if anybody wants to reach out to him with additional questions. It sounds like he would be open to that. And as mentioned in the beginning, this webinar was recorded, so if you have any interest in watching it again or passing it off to somebody on your team or a friend, that will be released. And then the remainder of the calendar can be found on pro.harman.com if you're interested in attending any of the upcoming webinars. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye.